Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph.
A royal crown can survive hundreds of years of war, fire, and scandal. But what happens when the danger comes from inside the palace walls? That was the scary question raised when whispers began to spread that Queen Elizabeth II's most treasured jewels were disappearing, not lost by accident, but deliberately hidden from the royal vaults. It started as idle gossip, dismissed as exaggerated grief after the late Queen's passing. But soon the rumors turned into something darker. Catalogs from private European auctions began to list pieces strangely similar to items in the royal collection: a Victorian diamond brooch, an emerald choker once worn by monarchs, even Diana's famous pearls. The idea was unthinkable had these priceless heirlooms been taken and offered to strangers under false ownership. What made the scandal explosive was the name whispered in connection to these sales: Queen Camilla. Reports claimed that a tiara worth nearly $15 million had been quietly listed under anonymous ownership, while delivery logs hinted at midnight transfers to Raymill House, her private estate in Wiltshire. I couldn't shake the image of Princess Anne's reaction when she learned of these suspicions. For a woman who guarded her mother's memory with almost military loyalty, this was more than theft. It was desecration. Witnesses described her fury as cold, precise, and unstoppable. The kind of determination that turns rumor into reckoning. And so the palace found itself facing a mystery with stakes far beyond diamonds and pearls. Were these jewels truly lost to time? Or was someone profiting from the crown's most sacred treasures? Stay with me until the end, because what began as whispers of missing heirlooms soon erupted into a confrontation that shook the monarchy to its core. To understand why whispers of missing jewels carried the force of a bomb inside Buckingham, you need to know what royal heirlooms truly mean. They aren't simply decorations glittering at state banquets. They are living relics, threads of history, woven into crowns, chokers, and brooches that tell the story of Britain itself. When a queen wears them, she represents continuity, stability, and an unbroken chain of monarchs stretching back centuries. When those jewels vanish, it's as if the very foundation of that chain begins to crack. Generations of rulers have treated these treasures as more than valuables. Queen Victoria's diamond brooch, for example, wasn't just a stone set in gold. It was a national symbol worn to mark alliances and wars survived. Elizabeth II wore the same brooch on her shoulder at important moments of her reign, reinforcing the idea that monarchy is less about individuals and more about lasting forever. So when word spread that this very piece alongside a sapphire necklace and emerald choker had disappeared, it wasn't just an inventory issue. It was a deep question for the crown. The lines between public heritage and private property only added fuel. In theory, some items belong to the royal collection, protected for the nation. Others are personal possessions passed down within the family. But where does one line end and the other begin? That confusion created fertile ground for suspicion. Was Camilla exercising her rights as queen consort, or was she taking heritage from the vaults for personal gain? I found myself thinking about a precedent that shaped the debate. During her Platinum Jubilee, Elizabeth II released a rare personal message saying that Camilla should one day be known as Queen Consort. That single line, not written into law, still reshaped public perception overnight. It proved that symbolism often outweighs legislation in royal life. So imagine the reverse. If Elizabeth's blessing could elevate Camilla, could whispers of Camilla's betrayal just as quickly destroy her? Inside the palace, advisors knew exactly how dangerous this was. One aide privately admitted that the jewels are more than stones. They are memory itself. Another worried aloud that if the rumors prove true, it will stain the late Queen's legacy forever. Those whispers spread faster than official denials, and the staff who had served Elizabeth the longest grew restless. Princess Anne, practical and firm, was especially haunted. She had stood beside her mother for decades, watching how Elizabeth wore each piece as both duty and symbol. To see them disappear was intolerable. Anne began to assemble her own quiet network, retired protection officers, trusted household staff, archivists who knew the vaults better than anyone. She wanted facts, not speculation. What struck me most in this stage was the silence from Camilla. While gossip swirled, she neither confirmed nor denied, projecting an air of composure. But silence can be deafening. For many inside and outside, Buckingham, her refusal to speak felt less like dignity and more like guilt. The stage was set for confrontation. Jewels that once represented unity were now fueling division. The monarchy, so skilled at hiding cracks, could no longer keep them invisible, and everyone knew that if proof emerged, the scandal wouldn't stay. Locked inside the vaults, it would explode across the world. The first real tremors of the scandal didn't arrive with a bang, but with quiet details that began to line up in a way that no one could dismiss. Catalogs from private European and Middle Eastern auction houses surfaced, each listing pieces that had an uncanny resemblance to jewels recorded in the royal archives. A Victorian diamond brooch, a sapphire necklace, an emerald choker tied to monarchs past each description matched the missing items too closely to ignore. For seasoned watchers of the crown, it was no longer a rumor. It was a pattern. Then came the whispers about Raymill House, Camilla's private estate in Wiltshire. Delivery logs suggested packages wrapped in velvet had been transported there late at night. A dismissed butler later confided that he had once been ordered to move crates under strict instructions not to ask questions. One memory burned into my mind. He swore he glimpsed Diana's unmistakable pearl bracelet, a piece tied closely to the late princess's legacy, locked away in a case bound for Raymill. That image alone was enough to send shivers down the spine of anyone who understood the weight of history in those pearls. I couldn't shake the feeling that each clue was pointing toward something deliberate rather than accidental. If jewels vanish in chaos, it can be explained as oversight. But when anonymous sellers appear at private auctions offering rare gems, identical to those last recorded in Buckingham's vaults, coincidence becomes impossible to argue. Public suspicion soon caught up with the whispers. A respected poll asked Britons whether they believed Camilla had mishandled the Queen's heirlooms. The result was striking. Nearly 2/3 answered yes, while fewer than 15% came to her defense. Those numbers didn't just reflect doubt. They reflected outrage. The jewels weren't only financial assets, they were emotional relics, and the idea that they might be hidden away or sold cut the public to its core. On social media, the movement gained speed. The hashtag #WhereAreTheJewels began trending, uniting royal watchers, historians, and ordinary citizens in a chorus of demand. Memes compared the missing brooch to national treasures like the Magna Carta, captioned with biting lines, "Would you lose this too?" The monarchy's carefully built image of stability now found itself mocked in viral posts. Inside the palace, tension grew thick. Staff, who had served Elizabeth II for decades, struggled with silence. Some admitted privately that they had seen items disappear from inventories without explanation. Others confessed they had been pressured into staying quiet. One insider revealed that when he raised questions about missing sapphires, his position was suddenly changed. The message was clear: keep silent or face consequences. What struck me most was how the world outside began to treat the story as fact even before the palace had spoken. For weeks, the whispers had swirled, contained just enough to remain palace intrigue. But the moment the press got their hands on evidence, the scandal burst into the open with a force that even Buckingham could not suppress. The spark came when a Sunday tabloid ran a front-page headline that screamed across newsstands: "Camilla's secret vault exposed." Beneath it was a damning subheading: "Queen accused of hiding Elizabeth's jewels worth millions." The story cited insiders, delivery logs, and most explosively the sealed letter from Elizabeth II herself that named Anne as guardian of the heirlooms. The article described in detail how jewels vanished from inventories only to appear in auction catalogs abroad, and how staff had been silenced or fired when they raised concerns. Readers didn't need imagination. They had names, dates, and a photograph of Diana's pearl bracelet next to an image from a Middle Eastern auction. The resemblance was undeniable. The reaction was electric. Outside palace gates, protesters carried signs reading, "Return the Queen's jewels." And Anne was right. Crowds chanted Catherine and Anne's names, framing them as defenders of Elizabeth's memory. Social media trended with hashtags "Where are the jewels?" and "Camilla erased," spreading the story to every corner of the globe. I was struck most by the visual contrast that television networks exploited. On one split screen, Princess Anne stood strong, holding her mother's letter, her face composed with grim duty. On the other, Camilla appeared under attack, denying accusations before cameras, her voice sharp and defensive. The difference was devastating. Anne looked like a protector of legacy, Camilla like a defendant caught in the act. Then came an unexpected twist from across the Atlantic. Prince Harry released private letters written by his mother, Diana. One passage confirmed that her pearl bracelet, gifted by the Spencer family, had been seen in Camilla's possession. That revelation poured fuel on an already raging fire, tying Camilla's alleged actions not only to Elizabeth's legacy, but to Diana's memory. A wound still raw in the hearts of millions. Headlines screamed, "Diana speaks from the grave." International coverage intensified. American anchors compared the scandal to Watergate, calling it Jewelgate. French outlets used the phrase "le scandale des joyaux," while German broadcasters referred to Camilla as Die vergessene Königin, the forgotten queen. Within 48 hours, over 20 million people had read or shared the story online, making it the most viral royal controversy of the decade. Charles, frail and cornered, was said to have begged for calm behind closed doors, but his attempts to defend his wife fell flat. Even sympathetic allies admitted privately that the evidence was damning. One courtier told a reporter, "When the Queen herself leaves instructions, how can anyone argue otherwise?" Camilla's public appearances turned brutal. At one charity visit, a reporter shouted, "Did you steal the late Queen's jewels?" Cameras caught her snapping. "It's nonsense." The clip went viral, replayed endlessly with mocking captions. Memes portrayed her clutching handbags bulging with jewels, a parody that shredded whatever composure she tried to maintain. Meanwhile, Anne's moral authority soared. Commentators praised her as the monarchy's conscience, the daughter fulfilling her mother's last wish. Editorials praised her determination, one newspaper declaring, "Anne defended the crown when silence would have destroyed it." The blow-up had reached its peak. What began as whispers of missing heirlooms had become a global trial by public opinion. The jewels, once symbols of unity, were now symbols of betrayal. And at the heart of it all, two women stood on opposite sides of history. One branded a thief in pearls, the other a guardian of her mother's legacy. But the storm wasn't finished because every explosion leaves wreckage, and the fallout from this one would reshape the monarchy forever. When the scandal exploded across headlines and airwaves, its aftershocks were felt not just in Britain, but around the world. The jewels themselves might have been locked away again under guard, but the monarchy's reputation had been cracked wide open. What had once been whispered gossip was now treated as fact, and no amount of palace spin could erase the images already burned into the public mind. Anne standing tall with her mother's letter, Camilla cornered by cameras, Charles silent and frail in the background. The first wave of fallout came in numbers. Polls taken within a week showed public trust swinging violently. 82% of Britons said they believed Anne's account, while just 11% believed Camilla. Approval ratings for the Queen consort collapsed into single digits, the lowest ever recorded for a senior royal. By contrast, Anne's popularity soared to heights she had never sought. One newspaper joked that the princess who always kept her head down has now lifted the crown's head up. What struck me most was how quickly allies disappeared. Courtiers who had once defended Camilla began drifting away. Aides quietly transferred to Catherine and William's offices, citing a shift in priorities. Even sympathetic journalists who had softened Camilla's image for years now called her a liability. Behind closed doors, Clarence House shrank to a skeleton staff, its once busy hallways echoing with absence. Charles, visibly worn, seemed powerless to change the tide. Insiders whispered that he begged his wife to stay composed, but his pleas only deepened her sense of betrayal. One aide recounted hearing her say through clenched teeth, "They've written me out of history, while I'm still breathing." That line, once leaked, became the title of brutal opinion pieces dissecting her downfall. Meanwhile, Anne carried herself with a quiet steadiness that increased her credibility. At a remembrance service, she wore one of Elizabeth's restored brooches pinned high on her jacket. The crowd erupted in applause, not the polite ripple of royal duty, but genuine admiration. Commentators noted that the gesture was not showy, but symbolic. The jewels were back where they belonged, visible and intact. Internationally, the monarchy suffered a rare wave of condemnation. American talk shows mocked Camilla's denials. French newspapers labeled her l'embarrassante, and in Australia, one headline bluntly read, "Stolen from the people." The jewels were no longer just decorations. They had become a symbol for broken trust. I couldn't shake the irony. Camilla had spent decades climbing toward acceptance, finally crowned beside Charles, only to watch her reputation fall apart faster than it had ever been built. The very objects meant to symbolize continuity had instead highlighted her fragility. The fallout inside the family was just as severe. Tensions at Balmoral ran high, with Charles torn between sister and wife. Staff described dinners marked by silence, the clinking of silverware, the only sound as Anne's evidence hung in the air like a verdict. In the end, Camilla gave in. Under immense pressure, she agreed to return the contested jewels, the Victorian brooch, the sapphire necklace, the emerald choker, Diana's pearls, and more. Yet, even as the items were restored, the damage was beyond repair. For the monarchy, the lesson was clear. Its survival depends not just on crowns and ceremonies, but on the trust of those who watch. And for Camilla, the scandal became a scar she could never cover. Every appearance from then on carried whispers, every photograph, the shadow of what she had lost. The fallout was complete. The jewels were back, but the Queen Consort's image lay in pieces. And looming in the distance was the chilling question. Had this truly ended the scandal, or was it only the calm before Camilla's desperate countermove? The jewels had been returned, polished, and placed once more inside the royal vaults. But their shine could not erase the shadows they carried. Each diamond, each pearl, now carried a mark of betrayal, a reminder of how close they came to being lost forever. For Princess Anne, there was grim satisfaction her mother's legacy had been defended, her duty fulfilled. For Camilla, the humiliation was permanent. The woman who had fought for decades to sit on the throne now found her reign reduced to whispers of vaults, auctions, and denials, replayed endlessly on screens. What lingered most was the silence. Camilla appeared in public with a strained smile, but the sparkle of legitimacy had vanished from her eyes. Anne moved forward with the steadiness of someone carrying both vindication and burden, and Charles, weary and divided, seemed haunted by the knowledge that his crown's survival had come at the cost of his wife's reputation. Still, the scandal refused to die completely. Rumors swirled of a second list of heirlooms yet to be accounted for, of treasures still hidden in private hands. Each whisper rekindled the question, had all of Elizabeth's jewels truly been returned, or was this chapter only half written? And so the monarchy stands at another edge, its treasures restored, but its unity broken. The world waits, breath held, for the next revelation. Because in a family where secrets shine brighter than diamonds, one hidden vault could start another firestorm. Commentators on television debated the morality of selling royal heirlooms as though Camilla's guilt was already proven. International outlets ran sidebars, showing photos of Elizabeth wearing the jewels at historic banquets, next to blurred images of look-alike pieces appearing at foreign auctions. The implication was devastating. Treasures that symbolized continuity were now being paraded as products. For Princess Anne, the signs crystallized into certainty. She saw in each coincidence a betrayal of her mother's memory. Known for her no-nonsense determination, she began compiling evidence into a folder of photographs, testimonies, shipping logs. Each page added weight to her belief that what was unfolding wasn't random. It was deliberate. And then came the mini-climax. A leak that revealed the timing of certain auctions lined up precisely with the disappearance of items from Windsor and Buckingham inventories. The timing was too perfect to ignore. The rumor of missing jewels had become a timeline, and that timeline pointed directly toward Camilla's orbit. The air around Buckingham grew electric, the kind of tension that comes before a storm. What had once been whispers now felt like something bound to happen. The cracks in the palace walls were widening, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they gave way to a public eruption. If the public had begun to piece together the mystery from catalogs and rumors, the real confrontation was unfolding in private, where silence could no longer hide the truth. Inside Clarence House and Buckingham's hidden chambers, the battle over the jewels became a clash of wills between two women whose loyalty to the crown could not have been more different. Princess Anne, careful and unwavering, assembled a small circle of allies she could trust. Former royal protection officers who had guarded her mother, archivists who knew the vault inventories, and household staff who had whispered of nighttime deliveries, all became part of her quiet task force. Together, they cross-checked delivery logs, auction listings, and photographs smuggled out by nervous insiders. Slowly, page by page, Anne built a folder so detailed it read like a prosecutor's case. One confidant later described the moment Anne laid it all out. Photographs of the Victorian brooch last worn by Elizabeth at a state banquet, matched in a Geneva auction catalogue, testimonies from staff who carried crates to Ray Mill House, and most damning of all, notes showing how certain items vanished from official records the very week similar jewels appeared overseas. I can almost picture Anne's expression, calm, serious, unblinking as she reviewed the evidence. For her, this wasn't just about gemstones. It was about protecting her mother's memory. The stage for confrontation was set in a private sitting room at Clarence House. Anne arrived with her folder in hand, her posture stiff with purpose. Camilla, trying to stay composed, received her with a strained smile, but the politeness disappeared quickly. Anne spoke with clipped precision, presenting one piece of evidence after another, her tone as sharp as any lawyer in court. Witnesses described the atmosphere as icy. Camilla tried to laugh off the accusations at first, insisting that record-keeping errors explained the differences. When Anne produced staff testimonies, Camilla shifted tactics, framing Anne as overly emotional, even paranoid. "You're seeing ghosts," she allegedly said, her voice tight. But the evidence stacked higher, and the walls of denial grew thinner. What struck me most was how Camilla fought not only with denials, but with counterattacks. Behind closed doors, she sought Charles's ear, portraying Anne as unstable and reckless. She argued that the monarchy could not withstand internal conflict made public. In whispered meetings, she floated the idea of reducing Anne's duties, of quietly pushing her aside before her accusations gained traction. It was a dangerous game, pitting sister against sister-in-law in a contest for believability. Then came the turning point, the discovery of a sealed letter tucked away at Balmoral written in Elizabeth II's own hand. The late Queen clearly named Anne as the guardian of her jewels, trusting her to protect them for future generations. Even more damning, the letter carried a warning to Camilla not to misuse or claim the heirlooms for herself. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Anne was no longer acting on suspicion. She was following her mother's final order. Insiders described the scene when Anne produced the letter. Camilla's practiced composure faltered. Charles shifted uneasily, torn between his sister and his wife. The weight of Elizabeth's words silenced the room. No courtier could dismiss them. No denial could erase them. For a moment, it felt as though the late Queen herself had entered the chamber. Her voice carried on the ink of her final message. I imagine the chill that settled then. For Camilla, it was not just accusation, but condemnation written by the monarch she had once hoped would accept her. For Anne, it was vindication, a moral authority no one could dispute. From that moment, the scandal transformed. It was no longer whispers of auctions and rumors of crates in Wiltshire. It was a family battle sharpened by the words of a dead queen. Anne's mission had shifted from suspicion to duty, from anger to obligation. The palace could try to bury stories, issue denials, or shuffle duties quietly. But with Elizabeth's letter in Anne's hand, the truth had become too heavy to contain. The jewels were no longer just decorations. They were evidence, evidence of betrayal, evidence of memory, evidence of a monarchy fighting itself from within. The confrontation at Clarence's house was only the beginning. The next stage would not remain confined to private rooms. The storm was moving toward the public eye, and when it broke, no amount of velvet curtains or golden doors could shield the crown from the fallout.